I don't think we started.
We started.
It's the music. Okay, we didn't. Oh, we didn't play the intro music.
Cold open.
Oh, you want to do a cold open without the intro music?
Yes, the cold open is before the intro music.
You gonna so you're not gonna play the intro music?
No, I'm going to. I'm gonna play it now. All right.
Okay.
Go for it.
Good afternoon, and welcome to This is Revolution. I am your host and co-host today, Pascal Robert, with our host and co-host today, M. Toussaint. And we are without our normal captain of the ship, Jason Miles, who is going out frolicking in the wonderful northern parts of California, hopefully seeing his family and having a good time and taking care of some business as well, having participated in some amazing panel discussions during the week. Today, we're going to have a program in which we're going to be talking about a subject matter that was dear to Jason's heart. And we're going to be looking at a few videos that he left for us to analyze the question, the ever pertinent question: is the left losing the culture war? So we're going to look at these videos. And Toussaint, how are you doing this Saturday morning?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, feeling pretty cheerio.
Spot of tea.
Salty, mate. Salty, governor. What are that bloke say? Well, it's top of them, Lord, blimey saying. But anyway. So we have these videos that we're going to show, right? To talk about how the culture war is framed. Not surprising, these videos are viewed or shaped through a conservative lens. But do you have anything that you want to add about how we're going to be kind of framing this episode at all?
Hmm. I think framing the framing is important. So we're definitely going to point out the framing. Just in case it goes over some people's heads, it's easy to get used to the framing and not recognize it. Otherwise, we're kind of going to go in a different direction than what Jason wanted, I think.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think that we should be true to what his concerns were,
Yes.
and in terms of saying that, he has a collection of videos from majority local TV stations, and he took them from major metropolitan areas. And you'll see that there aren't many people discussing any of these types of cases in left media per se. But when bringing anything like this up, you get normally what you get is people saying you're using right wing talking points. What Jason's trying to feel is that the coverage of these cases and the cases themselves are a result of a failure of the state and the activist class to assume that the defunding, abolishing the police and law enforcement was a single catch-all solution. So he's basically concerned that some of the rhetoric and discourse that we're using on the left to frame these social conditions is doing injustice to the actual concerns of the working class. The reality is that capitalist imaginations is incapable of seeing a better world. Is now the question that we have: is that really the truth? And there was never proper messaging when certain crime bills were passed to give time or shorter sentences for petty crime, that things would probably get worse before they got better. So a lot of this is motivated by the disintegration in the social networks that we're seeing throughout society, social conditions that we're seeing throughout society in places like San Francisco, in places like in New York, in places like we're seeing in LA, where you have proliferating degrees of homelessness, you have proliferating degrees of youth crime, and you're also having the overall quality of life diminish. And then the question that becomes is, why is this happening? And I think Jason's larger question is that, is there something that's strategically or structurally unable of the left's ability to address these problems, or at least rhetorically address them in a way that meets the needs of working class peoples? What do you think about that, M. Tucson? And what do you disagree with that framing?
I mean, I can agree with Jason's framing in terms of, default, fund the police and abolish the police not being an adequate response, and a catch-all solution. I agree there has to be more complex solutions presented from the left. I can understand that.
But okay, so why don't we show the first video and talk about how this frames the actual solution, the problem, and what we might find problematic. Are you interested in doing that?
Yeah, let's do that. Here we go. Here's the first video. 1 second. Let me mute myself.
It's that guy right there in the red.
But we're about to show you something crazy that happened in New York City on a lazy Sunday afternoon. You know, people are just in the park having a nice time. And then this woman just randomly comes up. Yeah. A crazed woman goes berserk. She's yanking the hair of a woman on the lawn, and she drags a woman by her hair. And people start yelling at her. She lunged towards a mom holding a baby. People gasped and yelled, and apparently it stopped her for a while, but then she went looking for somebody else, ripped up that guy's newspaper. She went berserk.
Yeah. Then she walked over to an area where people were sitting at a restaurant outside, the tables outside, and she just knocks plates and food and drinks on the pavement. She slams glasses down on the pavement and they break. She flips the sidewalk tables. She hurls trash over the fence, and then she is arrested. And she says, and a guy who is standing next to her while the police are handcuffing her says, "You don't go around beating up strange people in the street, like 7 people, pulling their hair, dragging them everywhere. She needs to not be let out." No, that guy right there in the red.
Yeah, right. And you know what?
So the other thing is, it's Thompson Square Park. This is where this happened, and you see these people just going about their day, and this is typical of what happens. People walk up and they menace, and not only did you do it in daylight, they do it on the subway. And this reminds me very similar to the Denny Penny situation. So if you're sitting there and there's a guy and he's being aggressive, or even a woman who's aggressive and might have a weapon, do you just sit there and let it happen? Or do you say, okay, there's no cops around, right, I got to get involved because there's a woman with a baby, there's another woman who's lounging out, gets pulled a few feet by her own hair. You ask yourself, what are you going to do here, knowing the other guy that stood up, the Marine, is now has a grand jury deciding if they're going to charge him.
Yeah, when that guy in the red sweatshirt was yelling at her saying, "Don't let her out, you shouldn't be doing this," she said, "No one died."
And then a word that starts with a B. Yeah. They carted her off to Bellevue, where she was taken for medical observation. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Well. We're not surprised that we're getting a certain kind of spin of that nature from, shall we say, Fox News. But I think there's several problematic things that are disclosed by that video. I'd like to hear your thoughts first, Tucson.
Living in New York, we know that there are people who might do things like that. I don't understand. There's a certain awareness that you need to have. Like towards the end, you saw a couple walking away, and that's exactly what you need to do. Walk away from the area. It's not a good time to stand your ground. Just read the situation. I don't know how you let somebody like that get close enough. Unless she's really wily, I don't know.
I mean, what's clearly here is the situation in this case is that this woman is suffering from a massive mental health issue, and that her condition is a demonstration of what has happened in the deterioration of the state's capacity to provide a kind of well-being for those who are emotionally disturbed in the capacity of the city, and they're just running the streets. So the question then becomes: is the failure of our society to actually care for those who are ill turn into a justification for vigilante justice? I mean, where we now supposed to are people supposed to take her out because she has this condition that makes her difficult to function in society? What exactly is the remedy that we think that the civilians should be having? As someone asked in the chat, so we want people to be afraid of each other so much so that they take out vigilante justice on each other in these kind of moments of dire circumstance? I mean, some would say that, the question becomes, is this a culture war? This is a culture war issue. One of the problems I have with the framing of the left culture war, is the left failing the culture war, is that who is using culture war as a framing in the first place? Usually it's the right. And usually it's the right because they understand that these little hot takes can inflame people because they don't allow for policy decisions that take time to really address over long periods what are causing the endemic issues that society is facing. And instead, you get these little emotional hot takes that make everyone feel that society is falling apart, and then, oh my gosh, we need to just stop and put everyone in check, or else, God forbid, it's going to be the apocalypse as a consequence of all of these types of phenomenon. So what I find is that the way we frame these quote unquote culture wars discussions, they're framed in a way to build on neuroses of the population and in a fear that denies the capacity of realizing that, listen, what are the policy discussions and realities and policy choices that we've had in society that got us to this period in quote unquote neoliberalism, where we've defunded so much of the social welfare state that we are cannibalizing members of society, so that we have no way to actually allow them to live in a place or in a society where we have mechanisms to protect themselves from their own kind of health or withering kind of conditions. And now it's kind of just let everyone out and says, you just do it on your own.
Totally agree. And it is a hot take. That's the perfect description for it. Because otherwise, this isn't really news. How did this make it onto, was it national news? This is Fox and Friends.
Correct.
There's no reason to be broadcasting that unless you want to give a hot take.
No, absolutely.
Spread some propaganda. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. Is that this form of media really takes hold in the national American consciousness with the rise of Rupert Murdoch and his empires, and when he invaded American TV in the 90s. Because in the 80s and the 70s, news was not like this. It wasn't shaped to try to appeal to the base instincts of American society's paranoia and fears. I mean, we had the talk shows that started to get bad in the late 80s, but this type of really kind of just base shaping to racial propaganda as well as fear and terror and all that stuff really is a consequence of the foxification of American media.
Foxification. Yikes.
You know, and also one of the things as well is that why is it that people are surprised that after a 2-year COVID social moratorium, where we had people suffering major unemployment, housing shortages, some people, turned out to having to become homeless in some cases. Why are we shocked that after the 2-year social dislocation of COVID, that we have reverberation that's still panning out in urban environments? I mean, isn't it obvious to realize that this crime is correlated to the phenomenon of COVID, particularly since right before the COVID crime wave, crime across the board was going down and we didn't have these phenomena. So something about the COVID phenomenon traumatized society so badly that we're having particularly these youth actors that are disturbing the social consciousness and creating these crimes. So shouldn't we kind of try to make the correlation as to why do we think that's happening? What are your thoughts, Tucson?
COVID is over. Also, it never happened.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's really kind of ridiculous.
That's the message. That's the message. And that's why you can ask questions and just end up with question marks, because we subtract the part where COVID would be in there to help explain so many things that are going wrong right now. People act like it's happening out of nowhere, and that's not true. We really memory hold COVID. We want to make it like it never happened, but it absolutely did. And in fact, I'm finding people are still coming out of COVID, still coming out of sheltering in place, still coming out of all the things that they were doing during COVID.
It's
After
incredible.
all this time. Yeah.
It's really incredible how things become so convenient for a society that tries to memory hold something that just happened within the last 2 years that explains phenomenon that we're dealing with today.
That's right. I think they just want to lock people up. And they also want to encourage the memory hole.
It's incredible. Do we have a next video? Do we have a next video queued up that we want to see?
Let's see. Where would you like to go next? Do you have a preference?
Oh, what about good old Eric Adams? What was he dealing with?
Let's do Eric Adams. Yeah. 1 second.
No, you're not a fan of this plan, right?
Well, of course I'm not a fan of this plan. It's absolutely outrageous. Not only does New York City have a housing crisis, we have an affordability crisis. People are renting apartments in New York City for thousands and thousands of dollars. People are having difficulty paying their mortgage, paying their rent, keeping up with their property taxes that have increased year after year. And the mayor is now telling hardworking taxpayers that they need to pay so an individual who crossed into our country illegally at the border last week can live rent-free. I mean, what planet are we living on? It's absolutely outrageous. And the mayor, I've said it before, needs to challenge, and he is, by the way, finally, after I've been calling for him for a year, to challenge this right to shelter law. It's finally going to go before a judge, because this was intended for homeless New Yorkers, right? Citizens who fell in difficult times, became homeless, to give them a shelter, not for individuals who just entered our country last week or citizens of other countries. And, you know, it's just, of course, this is going to continue to just incentivize individuals to come over our border. That's exactly what's going to happen. He says they keep coming because you're giving them free housing.
You know what strikes me about this, Congresswoman, is the fact for so long, those people, especially in New York and other, cities far away from the border, were very critical of the efforts to prevent people from coming illegally into the country. They were 2,000 miles away from where it was happening, but now it's on their doorstep, and they're getting a taste of what Arizona and Texas has been dealing with for years. So there's a little bit of, this is the reality of the situation. It would be interesting to see they change their mind on unfettered, migration across the border. Whatever happened to Homeland Security?
You're absolutely right. And in a city, in post 9/11 world, New York City of all places, understand the danger of having an open border. Found terrorists on the suspected FBI terror watch list attempting to cross over. Even in the interior, we found them. But in addition to that, you have the fentanyl, enough fentanyl to kill millions of Americans being found on a regular basis now. The drug cartels have set up operations in our cities. It all needs to be stopped, and it can only be stopped if the president undoes the policies he put in place and secures the border. The Senate takes up the House border security bill, which we passed last month. Senator Schumer has not passed our bill, and he has not passed his own bill. So he has to do something here so we can reconcile our differences and move forward. So short of the president or Senator Schumer doing something on border security, we're going to continue to see this crisis, and we should not have a mayor that continues to incentivize it. You know what's happening today in Washington? We've got the New York City Council Speaker, we've got the New York City Finance Chairman, Justin Brannan, here lobbying for more money so they can continue to add shelters, so they can continue to provide housing for. I'm just not going to support that type of policy. We need to get border security in place, and we can work on immigration too, by the way. We should be addressing the issues of visas. We should be addressing the issues of judges and other matters so we can have a proper asylum process that flows and order at the border. But what's going on right now is unacceptable.
Notice the paranoia about, the immigrants are coming and the terrorists are here, and oh my God. I mean, like this sounds like this woman is worried about the apocalypse because immigrants. I was like, when have immigrants not been coming to the United States? I mean, this is incredible, man.
I like how they extended the border state hysteria to New York City.
Which is not on the border.
Not on the border.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on in New York? I mean, that's going with this. I mean, I understand that we have a lot of people that are trying to cross the borders, but obviously that's also a consequence of the policies the United States has implemented that affect those countries at home. Yes, they have a serious problem with cartels and drug cartels on the borders of Mexico and in Mexico as well. That's something that needs to be addressed. I don't doubt that as well. But the making it seem like every third person coming across the border is some kind of a Mexican drug dealer is absolutely ridiculous, man. Like a lot of these people are coming from situations that we contributed to in their homeland. Where some of them may be from other parts over the seas. Some of them are coming from Haiti as well, and a lot of them are coming from other parts of Latin and South America. What are your thoughts about what you're seeing on this, Toussaint?
Absolutely. They're coming from situations that the United States contributed to. Not me. Not we. The United States government contributed to.
But you never hear that narrative when they discuss about these phenomena. They just make it seem like, these people are just coming here because they just want homes. But they had homes that some of them had bombed and destroyed because of the policies that we put forth or economically purge the policies that we put forth as a country in the U.S. But again, to the question of framing, how exactly should the left frame the challenge of immigration or quote unquote border patrol or border crossing in this particular moment? Do you have an idea?
Well, I like the Bernie Sanders approach because she mentioned open borders, which is ridiculous. The United States does not have an open border policy. This is not an open border policy. So he just dodges it. It's that's not even on the table right now, an open border policy.
I mean, I think that we should be, listen, as a country, we should be able to have stable immigration laws that we are able to force that should be able to consider people seeking asylum. There is a legal process in America called asylum. People should not be denied the ability to seek asylum in the United States simply because there might be an overflow. But the thing is, at the same time, is that there's never been, not in modern history, a serious attempt to create a truly impactful set of immigration laws on how to address these things effectively. So again, we're stuck in the right wing culture war narrative that the immigrants are swelling over. Well, part of the reason we have to realize also is that we have a lot of industries, particularly in Florida, that need these people who are coming, these undocumented workers, to do the work that most people don't want to do. Not everyone's going to quote unquote pick those vegetables that everyone complains that they want to pay so cheap for.
Exactly. Our country runs on this kind of immigration.
To a large extent. To a large extent, that's very true.
To a large extent, it's hard to have any of your famous restaurant chains, not even chains, any of your famous restaurants, particularly in New York City. That's what they run on.
It's a mess. It's a total mess, man. What's the next we got in the video queue? Don't we?
Next, we're going to Chicago. Give me a few seconds to set that up.
Oh, the Chicago one is extra special.
Chicago one is extra special. 1 second.
Yeah, so these are the kind of videos that we're trying to figure out when the right is actually pounding this messaging into people's mind. How does the left come up with a counter argument to these types of framings that help make society more conservative?
51 million going. That's going to last us only to the end of next month. And what happens July 1st when we're broke again?
Frustration boiled over during a fiery city council meeting as residents and aldermen disagreed on how taxpayer dollars should be used when it comes to migrants.
Ultimately, $51 million in funding was approved to help care for asylum seekers in our city.
Casey Cronus has the story now from City Hall.
Passed in a 34-13 vote. That money will go toward housing, food, and other resources for new arrivals. But the decision did not come without contentious debate.
The bottom line is, we're a sanctuary city. We've been bragging about it forever. We did nothing to prepare for it.
Since last August, more than 8,000 migrants have been dropped off in Chicago from the Texas border, with shelters and respite sites overrun.
Families have been living on the floor in police stations. This is unacceptable.
But those opposed to a massive budget amendment are questioning how the city can suddenly come up with so much money for new visitors when local communities remain neglected and homeless individuals are sleeping on the streets.
How dare this mayor and city council have the guts to give migrants $51 million.
During the city council meeting, the public weighed in.
We have not gotten anything for our community, and we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Enough is enough. And I voted for you, Brandon.
With tensions running high, arguments and interruptions were frequent.
I would ask that you would do it with some level of decorum. I believe that we can have public discourse without demonstrating the worst part of our debates.
That $51 million covers the remainder of a projected $102 million that it will cost the city to care for migrants through the end of June, with the rest coming from the state and federal government. But it's unclear what will happen when this money runs out. Reporting from City Hall, Casey Cronus, Fox 32, Chicago.
Now, this is a really serious situation here where you have the concerns of communities of color being pit against the immigrants as some kind of, everyone's challenging each other for the scraps from the government's table. kind of thing. That was a really sad demonstration of how interests of competing communities are being pit against each other for state resources. When now you have obviously communities of color, Black communities that have not necessarily been the best recipients of state funds are going to protest migrants who are in a desperate condition themselves receiving the funds that they need. What do you think of that horrible kind of dynamics in the messaging there, Tucson?
I think it's actually we didn't mention it, but that's also sort of what was going on in the Eric Adams clip. The migrants are being pitted against homeless New Yorkers by that representative.
I mean, this is exactly the kind of framing that reactionary right wingers need to make it seem like. It's like, oh, this is the problem with the left. It's like they deny our citizens to feed these groups and that groups. These groups can't get along. They can't have any solidarity. They're all fighting against each other in hordes, don't you know? And you know, in your suburban household, they're coming for you anyway. I mean, it's kind of madness, man.
Right.
We can't, if we're unable to see the humanity in even anyone in any of these groups, how are we going to be able to resolve the conditions that any of them are facing and come to some kind of collective understanding? These problems are rooted in political economy. We have to find some way to stop spending our resources subsidizing major corporations who are just using their profits to pay off their boards of directors and shareholders, as opposed to finding means to be able to actually socialize our communities with quality of life situations that'll be better for them. But I don't think Jason is off the mark in asking, what is it? Why is it that, first of all, when we say the left and culture wars, who is the left? Who is the left that we're talking about, Tucson, when we say that?
I don't know. Are we talking about liberals? Are we talking about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leftists who consider themselves some kind of Marxist?
Exactly. That's the point that I have with the question, because I think that we are conflating academics who are on the foundation funding train for their research, who are coming up with this cool slogan, who don't have to have any fiduciary responsibility to the public for these names, with actually the left. Let's make it clear. Most of the policy that these left think tanks, that we talk to the left think, most of the funding comes from capitalist sources. We don't have the independent foundation sources or independent funding sources that the right has. We don't have, the Federalist Society. We don't have main institution. Don't forget, since the Powell memo in the 70s, the right has been big at building, even before that, with think tanks and foundations, Koch brothers, all types of mechanisms to finance serious conservative policy. At best, you have these quote unquote liberals on what you call the left. Is Soros the left? Is the Rockefeller the left? Is the Ford Foundation the left? These are capitalists who want to engineer social engineering capitalist notions that are okay with their capitalist worldview in a way that is diverse on equity and inclusion, but doesn't change the actual overall redistribution of wealth and mechanisms. So all you have is a more black, brown, rainbow colored 14 shares on the top of the Titanic when the ship is sinking. So what we have here is that we're talking about the failure of the left. Who is the left? This is the question I would like to ask, because the kind of left that I think that me, you, and Jason care about, the left that is interested in actually rooting the problems of society in the way dialectically, materially, and political economy, in the way in which the causes are based in materialism and the inability of material resources to be allocated to find a way to solve these problems at their root, we would say, well, that's the part of the problem, is that we don't have enough of a left that's rooted in dialectical materialism to be able to actually address the problems. And because of that, we have to divert the the overall decision making to liberals.
Ooh. We don't want to do that.
Well, that's actually what we end up getting.
We don't. They have less of an imagination than we can even imagine. Yeah.
It's problematic. It's problematic.
It is.
You got something queued up already for us?
Yes. Just wanted to say also, Chicago and New York are sanctuary cities. Someone in that clip said, we're a sanctuary city. We basically knew this was coming and we didn't prepare for it. I mean, it also has to do with what kind of city do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a sanctuary city? Do you want to live in a city that takes people in and doesn't turn them away? It's becoming more and more important of a question. Something for people to think about.
It's a very good point.
All right, let's cue up the next one. We're going to Portland now.
Oh, this one. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
City of Portland, Oregon.
These are images and video from an army of citizen journalists in Portland who have been documenting a city in decline. Public drug abuse, addicts sprawled on the sidewalks or wandering the streets. Tent encampments on many street corners and fires seen burning along the roadways. What used to be one of America's most beautiful and livable cities is being slowly destroyed by epidemic levels of crime, drug abuse, homelessness, and mental illness. One local is called Portland an open-air insane asylum. We went to one of Portland's many tent encampments with drug and alcohol counselor Kevin Dahlgren, who's trying to help the city's addicts. Many of the tents you see here are supplied by Multnomah County. Dahlgren believes at least some officials are okay with what's happened to the city.
How could they not be okay with it for as long as this has gone on, right? Every day we walk past these camps, we see people languishing and dying on the streets. That is not okay. Every year we say this is a state of emergency, right? But who here is treating it like a true state of emergency?
Dahlgren says activists actually put up empty tents to attract more tents.
That is a common practice, to erect tents to invite homeless to be homeless, right? And that makes our job now 10 times harder. They will just erect the tents in hopes that a person will find the tent and move inside.
During our time with Dahlgren, he met one homeless man who said he was given a bus ticket to Portland by the city of Billings, Montana. Portland has become a mecca for addicts and drug dealers who have migrated here from across the country to take advantage of weak drug laws. It's also attracted drug cartels. There were 11 drug overdoses on March 31st alone, and one pill of fentanyl can cost as little as $1.
I feel like we've invited people to come to our city to kill themselves.
A Portland photographer who goes by the street name of Michelle Ghost has been capturing the decline of the city through her lens.
We're giving them the tools that they need to stay alive just long enough to end up dying on our streets.
After rioting over George Floyd's death resulted in the destruction of large parts of Portland in 2020, Mayor Ted Wheeler thanked the rioters before he went with tear gas.
Yeah, you notice how this is being framed all of a sudden. Oh my God, Portland is falling apart. Notice that there's no mention of COVID here. Notice that there's no mention that this happened as a consequence of COVID. All of a sudden, it's like, yes, it was the riots that George Floyd, and everything just fell apart right after that. No discussion at all. That basically for 2 years or a year and a half, people were literally just sheltered in place. Large numbers of people went unemployed. Whole businesses shut down. None of that was mentioned. It's all of a sudden it's just made to be like, oh my God, Portland for some reason is falling apart. It's all these liberal progressive laws. Did you complain about those liberal and progressive laws when IT firms were dropping at the bit to go move to Portland before any of this was happening?
I mean, later on in that reporting, they make it seem like progressive drug laws are weak laws. So if you don't want to just lock up people for using drugs, that's a weak drug law.
Well, I mean, this is part of the whole framing is that all of a sudden it was the laws that made it problematic when the laws for all this time weren't the problem at all. Maybe it's the social constraints that the city was under because of COVID that the city has not yet remedied and not addressed that is causing the problem. So having progressive laws that are somehow care for trying to adhere to helping people get off drugs instead of just carcerally punish them is the problem.
What do you make of the guy who got a bus ticket to go to Portland? The homeless guy.
I'm a little dubious of that question, that whole framing in the first place. It was like they're sending people here to die. Really?
Yeah. The lady taking pictures of the homeless people. What kind of project is that?
Well, I understand also this is a CBN network, so you know that they have a certain religious framing that they're going with. That they're trying to expose that, like, the progressives and their godless ways are getting to these problems. That's why you have to get right with the right-wing narrative of, whatever kind of religious fervor they're using today.
Yeah, that one couldn't be more similar to the other videos, which were mostly Fox News, local Fox News affiliates. You still have that right-wing framing.
Very much so. You want to continue with this one?
Yes.
Things got worse for the city when Oregon voters approved Measure 110. It decriminalized possession of small amounts of drugs, making it a healthcare issue and not a crime. Police officials say it's led to a huge increase in the amount of drugs on the streets, which has led to a surge in crime. It wasn't always like this.
Portland, Oregon, one of the nation's most beautiful cities. The citizens of Portland attend many fine churches. It is a family town, a good place to bring up children.
In Portland today, a viral video shows a man using drugs in front of a child. Just last week, a man beat someone with a golf club in front of this Portland restaurant. The nervous owners then offered the attacker hot coffee, which he dumped on the victim. 79% of businesses surveyed in Portland have been victims of vandalism or break-ins. 19% have been vandalized at least 5 times.
Our business has been vandalized over half a dozen times. We've had 5 burglaries in our business. We've had over $100,000 worth of impact.
Walmart and Cracker Barrel are part of a wave of businesses that have fled the city. More than 2,600 downtown businesses have left.
I'm very frustrated with what's going on.
Tech company owner Gabe Johnson is also looking to relocate.
By us continuing to keep our business in the Multnomah County and the Portland city limits, we are giving money to the problem. And so we're going to move.
Portland's social experiment, this progressive experiment, has gone colossally bad.
Jeff and Angela are Portland business owners and community reporters with PDX Real.
I can't stress it enough. It has impacted everything from our banks are being broken into, ATMs are being stolen. We have people that are just going to work, walking in their neighborhood, being assaulted.
It's like it's in some sort of like controlled demolition, really. And when I say that, it's because a lot of this stuff comes from policy.
Lax laws against car theft have made stealing cars a growth industry in Portland.
Once again, the lax laws and the policies. What was Portland like before COVID? What was Portland like before COVID is the question I want to have.
It was quirky.
Yeah, it was. They said we used to be. There was a scene in that where guys said we used to be proud that Portland was weird. Now we just want to go back to just being weird.
Portland wants to go back to being weird and quirky.
No, this is so disingenuous when we don't talk about the phenomenon. Now, obviously, we cannot mitigate that people are living in serious quality of life, desperate situations. That
Right.
is not a happy situation at all. We need serious policy, and I would say we need to look at the drug offense laws. Sure, we need to look at the actual the crime, the laws when it comes to police theft and all that other stuff. But again, what exactly are the root causes that are turning kids and young people that were in a normal functioning society into drug use at this extent? Did something happen that traumatized the functioning of this city? Or are there cops that are under investigating crime now? That's another question to ask. So these are a lot of things that need to be demonstrated. But I'm not opposed to us saying that, listen, we need to look at the way in which police interface with the infrastructure of society in this state. And we need to make allocations so that's done in a way that it can neutralize this crime. I understand that. I get that. But at the same time, yeah, people are talking about cop slowdown. That was another consequence of the George Floyd protests. The cops slowing down as a result of being called, quote unquote, the cops are murderers or the criminals or the the class enemies of the masses.
I remember the slowdown. Do you remember the firecrackers?
No, I don't know what was the firecrackers. What were those about?
Happened in a lot of major cities. A lot of people were just reporting on social media. Have you been hearing really loud firecrackers?
Okay, yeah, I
To
remember that.
really, yeah, and the cops were not stopping it. So people considered that part of the slowdown.
Well, some people, the slowdown was not necessarily about the protest, but was about COVID in itself. That the cops did not want to engage because they were afraid of contacting people who were sick. That they generally wanted to actually avoid engaging with people.
They were getting sick by the scores, the cops.
That's right.
Some of them also didn't believe in it and they were getting sick. It's not just dealing with the public, but yes.
So that was a major consequence of the phenomenon as well. But this kind of, again, these are deep policy questions that a bunch of podcasters and their fans are not going to be able to have the answers to. What we need to have is policy institutions rooted in a dialectical material analysis to understand what is the most effective way to solve crimes in this city without having to go to increasing the carceral state, which means a fancy word for saying putting more money into cops in jails and prison. Because one of the consequences of us doing that is that it got us the 94 crime bill. And it also got us to a point where now, some communities have 33% of their males that have a felony arrest. And that's not exactly acceptable.
No, that's outrageous. 33%. One out of three.
It's pretty bad. You want to continue with this, Toussaint?
Sure.
One out of every 2 police stops in the city involves a stolen car. We went to one of Portland's former CHOP sites with Nick Haas, the founder of Guardians Recovery, a community-based group that has helped recover more than 700 stolen vehicles.
This is the site of the Midway CHOP operation. The Midway CHOP operated for about 6 to 9 months, and our crew estimates about 250 to 300 stolen vehicles were illegally processed and cut up into pieces at the site. There was basically catch and release. If you got caught with a stolen vehicle, you're going to get booked, you're going to get held for about 40 hours, you're going to get put back out on the street. So it kind of became like a candy land for them.
Critics call Portland the poster child for what happens when progressive policy goes too far. Portland officials are now conducting tent sweeps to clean up the city, and some believe Portland may be turning the corner. But drug abuse, homelessness, and crime remain high.
Imagine, absent some of the decay we've seen, what a great place it could be to live.
MC Street Truth is the alias of a Portland businessman who co-founded the Coalition to Save Portland with Gabe Johnson.
I remember when we used to celebrate the idea that Portland's weird. This is kind of how it is. It's weird, it's quirky. It's not funny anymore. We'd like to go back to where Portland was just weird. Now it's scary.
One writer asked, how long does it take for a city to die? Dale Hurd, CBN News, Portland.
This is really... Yeah, you can see exactly the framing that they're trying to sponsor here, buddy. Is that the city is dying. The cities are dying. I mean, it's this consistent message. The cities are dying because of all this liberal, progressive media. Not to mention that some of the greatest crime rates we've had increasing are in the southern red states in the South. But you don't see those reports. Why is it that we don't see the reports of what the crime rates are going on in the red states in the South? But they always talking about it's the progressive left states. I remember when I was reading right after COVID in terms of reports of murder and rape, and I was like, oh my God, this is happening like massive red states. But you never hear that. It's like, oh, it's the progressive legislations that are causing this all the time.
A city is dying. That's an old narrative. Was it Ford to New York City drop dead?
I can remember hearing about the city is dying several times in various places in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's absolutely absurd. So again, Toussaint, what exactly does this say about the politics? Like, you know, one of the reasons that I think that we have left politics is not because we actually think that tomorrow we're just going to win and we're going to sway people to our sides, because we believe that our politics are the humane way to address the things that are ailing society and people overall. But that being said, we do want our politics to be victorious. In the light of that, what do you think can be done better? Do you think we need to have mechanisms as overpowering as right-wing media to be able to actually win this thing called a culture war? Or should we not even be wasting our time trying to do that, but try to get our messaging out effectively to bring people to our side? Can we do that in the light of this culture war?
It's certainly worth a try. If the other side can do it, there's no reason why we can't. In terms of just
lack of capital.
Well, that's in getting the message out, but we can come up with messages. We can certainly do that. We can try to get our messaging out, and I think that we have the truth on our side of what actually would make a city great and what would make people's quality of life better. We do have a super chat. I'm going to read that right now.
Notice how these reports mention the specific progressive policies that have led to the problem.
Mention them. They do. They focus on what's progressive. They sure do. And progressive equals bad. I have that literally in my notes.
Just because they mention that that's what the problem is, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a correlation to that, because before there was a rise in these crimes, those legislations still existed and they weren't a problem. I would argue that this has been some kind of alteration into the quality of life in those cities, i.e. what happened during COVID, that made those policies problematic for that area. Because there was a time during that area when those policies actually worked. So the quality of life for people in that area became more desperate, where they started to look to more drugs and crime as a means to solve their problem.
Totally agree. I don't know if people understand what progressiveness is.
Well, I think he said never mention. I think he meant to say they never mention.
I think so too. They never mention what the actual progressive policies are. They certainly don't mention what the purpose of the policies were either.
Exactly.
It's just we had them. They fell on us.
Or they never actually compete and ask, well, what exactly were criminal results in red states that don't have these policies?
That's very true. We can compare.
So People are talking about Pat Robertson being dead. I don't know if we want to wax rhapsodic on our thoughts on Pat Robertson.
Follow-up super chat.
He said he meant to say never mentioned. No problem, Arthur.
No problem. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the super chats, both of them. You have middle.
Would you like to head back to New York?
I don't think. Listen, first of all, I don't like the cold weather. It's kind of rough out there nowadays.
In terms of the clips, would you like to head back?
Not particularly convinced.
Well,
do we have another clip we want to go to? Or do we have time for?
We have Eric Adams, another new state bill. Oh, this is a state bill.
Let's take this one and just wrap it up with this one.
All right. This one was a doozy. I was really thrown by this. Oh, wait, let's see. This one is San Francisco, actually.
Oh, this is San Francisco and the ones about shopping?
Yeah, let me check my notes 1 second. San Francisco. Because this is about the robberies in San Francisco. Yes. There's the New York one about retail workers. I kind of want to do.
Which one do you want to do?
The New York one. Let's see. Where is it? All right, give me a minute. You can be entertaining.
Oh, this is interesting. I love it when it's like, the orders. Like, I got 3 balls in my hands. Let's just start juggling. So
that's right.
But it's really interesting to me how this kind of framing dominates so much of the media in this country, and people try to wonder why we have such a reactionary country in this space, and how the formulation of capitalist realism that gets stuck in the mind of Americans becomes the reality that it is when our news networks have this kind of framing. It shouldn't be shocking. And the question becomes, how exactly can we create a different type of ideological superstructure so that we don't have the people mentally being stuck to this type of worldview on a day-to-day basis where they can think outside the box or the purview of society?
One second. I'll be right there.
It's really problematic, kids. Folks. We got our video queued up. What happened? Did we have our video queued up? We had our video queued up and we had a bit of an error. Well, yeah, these kind of questions become very much important because when we have to understand that the left is very small and quite frankly, we don't have that much power. And we're always going to be put on the side where people say, well, these people don't have any kind of answers for these problems. Well, we got to ask how these problems got here in the first place.
This report about how some people working in retail do not like the proposed legislation.
More recently, we've seen another spike in retail violence. Safeways, Home Depots, it just seems to be happening every other day.
State Senator Dave Cortese says Senate Bill 553 is another step in the fight against workplace violence. The bill is designed to require employers to provide active shooter training to workers, keep a log of all violent incidents in the workplace, and allow companies to petition for workplace violence restraining orders on behalf of an employee.
What we're saying in the bill is it's not okay for an employer to take a rank and file worker, somebody whose job is really something else, a reporter, for example, and say, hey, if there's an intruder, we're going to deputize you to be the one to intervene. People get hurt and oftentimes killed that way.
In April, 25-year-old Blake Moss was shot and killed when he tried to prevent a woman from stealing from a Home Depot in Pleasanton. About 2 weeks later, 24-year-old Bango Brown was shot and killed after a scuffle with a security guard in a San Francisco Walgreens. Still, over 50 organizations, including the California Retailers Association, don't support the bill.
This bill goes way too far, number one, where I think it will open the doors even wider for people to come in and steal from our stores.
The California Retailers Association says if SB 553 becomes law, it will need to apply to all industries and not just retail. They also say most retailers already prohibit regular employees from approaching anyone about stolen merchandise and have some employees who are trained in theft prevention.
It says no employee can approach someone who is shoplifting. So even if someone is trained on how to deter someone from doing that, now they're not allowed to approach someone. So what does that mean? We are opening up the doors to allow people to just walk into stores, steal, and walk out.
Senator Cortese says there'll be some adjustments made to Assembly policy committees. The bill has already passed the Senate. LaMonica Peters, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
When you shop Wayfair, you can't help but show off. It's impossible.
Tough situation there. Tough situation. Because now you're asking about whether or not employees are going to be armed or empowered to stop criminal offenses at the workplace, as opposed to allowing crimes to occur. And how much training are you going to give the workers is the question I'm asking.
How much are you going to pay the workers is what I'm asking.
It's a good question.
Retail workers aren't paid enough to be retail workers. And
now you want them commandos too?
Exactly. Are they shooting to kill? Or shooting to maim?
Yeah, exactly. That's another type of vigilante justice you're kind of opening up as well.
Yeah, that's true. None of this is worth it.
This is a really, really. Whatever happened to the notion that you can death in pursuit of property is not, or using death as deadly force in protecting property is not allowed.
Or worth it.
Or worth it. It's another thing. But then you have this just stand your ground exceptions that people use as well.
The footage of people just shoplifting in hordes.
Is there a better way that we can explain that besides shoplifting? I think calling that just shoplifting, I think is to what that was, because shoplifting is something like someone just taking something and just hiding it in a bag. And cats are taking like whole racks of clothes and be like, oh my gosh. Do we have a guest coming in?
We have a special guest coming through. Hello, special guest.
Sorry, it got loud all of a sudden. I was listening to the show. I'm actually in one of the crime meccas, and I wanted to see if you guys wanted to see what it looks like.
I see. Where are you? In San Francisco?
I'm in San Francisco. Am I cutting out?
No, you sound great.
Yeah, I'm actually in downtown San Francisco right now. I just left the Chinatown area.
How did you like the show?
Huh?
How did you like the show?
Is it still going on?
We're still on right now.
Oh, that's unnecessary. Nigga knew it was unnecessary. It was great. What do people think? I can't see the chat.
She would like to add some great comments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's real fucked up because, as I said before, there's a big difference between the 90s and now. Because this is like petty crime where these cats really aren't making out with a lot of stuff. If you stole a whole bunch of razors and deodorant, maybe you can make a few bucks selling it on the street. And even the cats that are breaking into stores stealing clothes and shit, it's really not that much money they're making. And what I ran into somebody here downtown when I was with my daughter yesterday, and we were having a great conversation. And apparently her husband or her boyfriend started the Howard Zinn Book Fair, and she says her boyfriend feels that there's a capital strike going on where retail wants more tax breaks. So they're just being like, we're about to bail out. Because also when COVID hit, one of the things people don't talk about why these businesses are leaving, a lot of their leases were up. So this could be a way for them to be like, look, people are breaking into stuff. It's a problem. We're going to take all the jobs with us, because Nordstrom's is leaving. And they were a pretty big employer here. As far as retail, I think like 23 Walgreens left. I mean, you can't see it, but there's a bunch of empty storefronts where I'm walking in a place where there was a lot of stuff. So there's something to be said about the idea of a capital strike, but how are these more liberal mayors going to react to this? And I think you're seeing a return to like third way democratic policies that were really big in the late 80s and early 90s. You know what I mean? Do you guys feel that?
Yeah, neoliberalism.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Like all the quote unquote advances. I don't know if you guys said this in the main show. I didn't get to watch all of it, but the defund the police, abolish the police was almost kind of painted as a catch-all answer for all problems, and it was never an answer to poverty. And poverty remains.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not who responds to poverty. It's fucking poverty. And people don't want to see it, right?
Well, part of the thing that we talked about, Jason, is that the left is not structured to address these policy issues, because the left is basically designed to critique the problems that got us here, and we don't have the institutional mechanisms, because what we have on the left are financed by capitalists through foundation. We don't have independent think tanks. We don't have Koch brothers of the left. I mean, even if we did, we wouldn't want that. We need to have independent mechanisms to create policy. The left doesn't create. We don't have. I mean, we have institutes, but real policy, power wielding mechanisms that change policy. We don't have a media infrastructure. What do we have? Podcasters? That's not Fox News.
What are you saying, man? I take offense to that.
I mean, it's just
No,
that, it's just that, for us to assume, to think that we can wield ideological power in this society makes us really have to assess, listen, man, we have to work on, and I still think dressing people where they are and meeting them where they are in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and trying to get them to understand why the state and the capitalist systems are not working for you, and we need to find a way to mobilize and organize around new politics and a new vision of politics and something different than this digital stuff. Because listen, the system is not working. It's not, and it's immiserating a lot of people, and we need to actually find a way to stop that from happening.
Do you guys feel that the messaging war of a lot of this stuff is just totally lost by the left? Because I do.
I think the terms of communication structure it so there's no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other choice.
I'm gonna show you guys the menu, and you tell me if I should eat here.
Oh God. We can barely see that.
Can you see that?
You can barely see that.
You can barely see it? It's a little hole in the wall. Like, I love little hole in the walls.
Chinese
I'm going to
food?
go here. I'm going to go A. Thank you, Pascal and Toussaint.
All right, brother. We'll see you when you
I'm
come.
sad I wasn't on this show because this is something I've been trying to put together for a long time. Thank you guys
Well,
for watching.
hopefully, when you watch the whole thing, you feel we did you justice.
Oh, I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's Pascal Robert.
Ooh.
All right. Well,
I'm
Toussaint did a
chopped
great
liver.
job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, Toussaint actually was a big part of this conversation as well. When I was trying to, flesh out these ideas, I sent you guys this really long essay about the whole thing before and she was helping me flesh out a lot of these ideas that I had about this moment that we're in, and kind of the fear that I have about this moment because there is nothing organized, much like we had in the 80s and the 90s. And there is such a tendency to be so anti-establishment that if all you can see is no, all you can do is nothing. I'm really worried about, oh, why are you crying? Oh, see, then she stopped crying. There's not really going to be any solutions. There's going to be no counter to this soon-to-be attack from liberal governors and mayors and DAs that are going to stop prosecuting officers like we're seeing in San Francisco now that Chase is gone. And they're going to come down much harder on property crime on the local level. And this is going to take all the power out of the presidency. So all this whole who you want to vote for and should Cornel West do this and who should run third party, I don't give a good goddamn. Who's going to run fucking San Francisco? Who's going to run LA? Who's going to run New York?
All good questions.
Who's gonna rail in the city council? We were with our buddy Bill Cody, who worked in the LA City Council. He was trying to explain to us that to change one light bulb in one park, there were 3 different organizations, 3 different city organizations, departments rather, that were in charge of different parts of the light bulbs. So if a light bulb went out and someone called his office to be like, "Hey, you gotta change this light bulb," he's like, "Take a picture of it." Like, "We're not taking a picture of it. It's out. Just change it." He's like, "Well, I need to see where it's at because different." And they hung up on him.
Wow.
He said that there would be people that were mad in the area that he worked in because homeless people were coming in there with RVs, tapping the power lines, and setting up shop. The same people that were calling for him to remove the homeless people were the same people that had defund stickers and placards all over their lawn and windows. And he was like, "Well, if you want the police to come, you're going to have to take that shit down."
Wow.
I mean, they did. So it's complicated. I don't have the answers, but there's a lot of smart people that watch this show. Maybe they can help us work through it.
Maybe.
I can't even figure out what the fuck I'm going to eat. As Toussaint and Pascal know, I'm very difficult about that.
Tough decisions.
Tough decisions. Well, I love y'all.
All right, brother.
Love you.
Peace.
Bye.
Take me off.
Oh.
Hola.
Well, all right. Well, Toussaint, you ready to wrap it up?
Yeah. Yeah,
All
I
right.
think we did our thing.
This has been a great show. For those who are lovers of the show, check us out on Tuesday and check out our show White Guy Wednesday and Thursday as well this week on This is Revolution Podcast. And to say our famous ending quote, we are out.
And make sure you hit like.